When this matter is resolved, letun Remar, okay. I was sitting on the stone bench in the villa's courtyard, lost in thought, when Ethan brought La in front of me. Just 3 hours ago, she had been caught on camera by paparazzi, suspected of being Ethan's mistress. The entire internet was digging into her past, accusing her of being the homewrecker who destroyed May and Ethan's sweet love story. A third party, an intruder. Ethan's public image as a devoted husband was collapsing overnight. Even the foundation of his company began to shake. In my past life, when Ethan came to me with divorce papers, I was so furious, I uprooted every rose he had planted for me in the courtyard. I had screamed hysterically, demanding answers about his relationship with La. She was clearly just his benefactor daughter. There were countless ways Ethan could have handled the situation, but he chose to sacrifice me just to prevent La's depression from worsening. What Ethan didn't know was that during the online scandal, I was also diagnosed with moderate depression. Autumn. Ethan called my name again, snapping me out of my thoughts. I lowered my gaze and fixed my eyes on the divorce papers lying on the stone table. Ethan knelt on one knee at my feet, his deep eyes looking up at me. His warm hands clasped mine, and his voice was coaxing. Autumn, do this for me, okay? Tell the public that our marriage has long been in name only, that we decided to divorce a year ago, but just hadn't found the right time to announce it. I didn't respond immediately. Behind him, La stood in a white dress, draped in Ethan's jacket. Her lips were pale, her eyes rimmed red. Sister Autumn, please help me, okay? She pleaded. My mother took her own life because of online bullying. I don't want to follow in her footsteps. Please, I'll even get on my knees and beg you. She was about to kneel when Ethan swiftly stood up, supporting her and pulling her protectively into his arms. His expression darkened as he softly scolded her. What are you doing, Ella? La flinched. Her voice was fragile and tearful as she looked up at him with tears in her eyes. I just wanted Sister Autumn to feel better. Ethan's patience visibly waned, and he turned to me, the gentleness in his demeanor vanishing completely. Autumn, I'm not here to negotiate. I've already made up my mind. If you refuse to sign, don't blame me for what happens next. I looked at him calmly. I knew what he was about to say. I was well aware of the lengths he would go to. If it came to a lawsuit, I couldn't possibly win against his company's lawyers. That's exactly what he had said in my past life. Later, I was set up and photographed in compromising situations with mail. Models' evidence that branded me an adulteress overnight became a public disgrace, shamed by the world, while he and La played the roles of innocent victims. I nodded after a long pause. I'll sign, but you have to agree to one condition. Ethan glanced at me quickly and nodded. He handed me the pen and I took it, my expression utterly calm as I signed. My name on the divorce papers. You're not going to read the agreement first? Ethan frowned at me. I smiled faintly. No need. The terms are practically a clean break. He was giving up all the assets, leaving with nothing just to protect LA and repay her families. Kindness. Let's go to the Civil Affairs Bureau tomorrow, I said. Okay, he replied. For a moment, his hand holding the divorce papers hesitated. His eyes held a hint of confusion, but he ultimately said nothing. As they left, La turned to glance back at me with a mocking smirk. Her lips moved silently, but I could clearly make out her words. You've lost. I had indeed lost everything in my life, but now I didn't want to lose again. Half an hour later, my phone screen lit up with a message from Ethan. Autumn, I'm sorry you had to endure this today. Once this situation blows over, I'll give you a grand wedding banquet and we'll remarry. I can't just stand by and watch La's depression worsen. You understand me, don't you? I read his words and couldn't hold back a laugh, though tears welled up in my eyes. It was just like in my previous life. Ethan had gotten drunk with his friends and tried to come up with a plan to force me into divorce. What he forgot was that his friends were also my friends. One of them, Jason, had tried to persuade me too. Understand Ethan, saying he was a man of deep loyalty and gratitude. He explained how Laha's father had recognized Ethan's talent, invested in him, and helped him start his business. Without Laha's family, Ethan wouldn't have achieved his success. I had cried as I retorted that Ethan could have clarified. Everything in countless ways. Why did it have to be divorce? Jason had fallen silent, admitting he'd asked Ethan the same question. Ethan's answer had been, someone has to be wronged. Tom will understand because she loves me. How absurd. As I loved him, I had to sacrifice myself. Luckily, I still had a chance. When it came to LA, Ethan always acted quickly. That very afternoon, after signing the divorce papers, he arranged a press conference for the evening. He even sent his assistant to invite me to attend and clarify the situation. Before I could respond, the assistant, assuming I would refuse, relayed Ethan's words. Miss Autumn, you should attend this press conference. Even if it's not for Mr. Ethan, it's for your reputation. I paused for a moment, then let out a bitter laugh. Ethan was threatening me, trying to use the same tactics as in my past life to force me into submission. He wanted to smear my name and make me suffer under public opinion until I had no choice but to bow. I'd never understood. Did Ethan see me as his wife or his enemy? This time, he wanted to publicly clarify our relationship, and I was no exception. The press conference was held in the grand ballroom of the city's most luxurious hotel. The invited journalists were all influential figures. When La appeared arm in arm with Ethan, dressed in an elegant cheongsam, the reporters swarmed around them. Ethan instinctively shielded her, smiling as he gently blocked microphones. Please, give us some space. I'll answer your questions one by one shortly, he said, his voice calm and polite. His gaze briefly met mine amidst the crowd, just a fleeting moment. I foolishly hoped he might step in to shield me too, but the next second, he looked away, his expression unchanged, his smile unwavering. La was on stage, as if he hadn't seen me at all. I scoffed, curling my lips into a bitter smile. A young reporter, probably nervous, handed me a microphone and asked, Miss Autumn, is it true that you've divorced Mr. Ethan? I nodded calmly. The intern pressed further. You and Mr. Ethan were high school sweethearts, dated for 7 years, married for 5. Just last month, he even bought an island and named it after you. How could you divorce so suddenly? I maintained my smile, though it no longer reached my eyes. That island was something he owed me, I replied. I cared for La during her illness. Ethan missed my birthday and didn't even bother to get me a gift. My past life, I was foolishly overjoyed about that island only to later learn. It was Jason's idea. Ethan didn't even know where the island was. The intern hesitated before asking timidly, Do you still love Mr. Ethan? Silence fell. Every reporter nearby stopped talking, waiting for my answer. Ethan, standing on stage, turned his gaze toward me, his brows furrowing slightly. I met his eyes briefly before turning back to the intern and answered without hesitation. No. The interview didn't last much longer after Ethan publicly clarified that our marriage had been effectively over for a year. He left the venue overnight. I became the discarded, used object in the eyes of the public. Meanwhile, La was hailed as the innocent victim of the entire scandal. The interview from that day remained pinned at the top of social media platforms. For days, and the topic continued to trend. Ethan's words at the press conference only fueled the fire, and I had already planned a divorce a year ago. We were trying to handle it quietly, but now that innocent people had been implicated, we had no choice but to clarify everything publicly. La is not a third party in our relationship. She is the only person my mentor cared about in this world, and it's natural for me to take care of her. I hope everyone can see this matter rationally. Fans were quick to twist the story, claiming that the reason for my breakup with Ethan was my inability to tolerate even the slightest flaw. They portrayed their so-called pure sibling bond as something noble, while painting me as petty and lacking grace. They said I hadn't learned even a shred of Ethan's loyalty and gratitude after 5 years of marriage. The rumors kept fermenting for days, turning me into the villain of the story. After I finalized the divorce and stepped out of the Civil Affairs Bureau, Ethan stopped me. Don't take what people are saying online to heart. It won't be long before they forget all about it, he said. I paused, unable to hold back a faint laugh. Funny, isn't it? We're both being attacked online, yet the treatment is so starkly different. Ethan didn't respond. Instead, his expression tightened. Autumn, in 2 months, it'll be New Year's. letun Remar, okay? He stepped closer, his gaze intent. I took a step back, keeping my tone calm as I glanced toward the reporters nearby, who were being held back by security. Ethan seemed to realize he'd said too much and stopped. "I'm going back to Harbor City," said. "It's been a while since you've been back." "Maybe it's a good idea," he replied. "When New Year's comes, I'll pick you up and bring you home," I interrupted before he could finish. "Ethan, when I agreed to sign the divorce papers, you promised me one thing." "It's time you kept your word," I said. His smile froze on his face. Confusion clouded his eyes. "I want you to never appear in front of me again," I said with a smile, and then I turned to leave, disappearing into the crowd. Ethan stood there frozen, unable to process what I'd just said. For a brief moment, I saw panic flash across his face, a fear as if he were about to lose something most precious to him. It was the same unease he'd felt when I signed the divorce papers. Back then, expecting me to scream, cry, or cause a scene like I used to, he had even prepared for it, rehearsing ways to handle my outburst. But I didn't. I calmly picked up the pen, signed my name, and walked away. In that moment, he felt a fleeting urge to stop me, but he ultimately did nothing. He told himself it didn't matter because Autumn loved him deeply. It was just a fake divorce. He'd always make it up to me later, but Law was different. He couldn't allow her to get hurt in any way. Years ago, it was Law's father who had seen Ethan's potential and risked alienating other shareholders to invest in Ethan's project. That decision had elevated Ethan to the status of one of the city's rising elites. Before Law's father passed away, he made Ethan promise to take care of Law and ensure her well-being. Ethan couldn't bear to betray that trust. Jason once asked Ethan if one day both LA and Autumn fell off a cliff, who would he save? Ethan had laughed and dismissed the question as absurd. "Of course I'd save Law," he said. "Also die with Autumn." Jason had laughed, but then he added, "And what if Autumn doesn't want to die?" "Ethan, you can't keep hurting her by taking advantage of her love for you. If she ever stops feeling your love, she'll lose hope." Ethan hadn't taken those words seriously at the time. He brushed them off without a second thought, unaware of how prophetic they would become. That night, Ethan returned to the villa after marrying Ethan. I had always lived in the villa, halfway up the hill. I was an exceptional artist, celebrated. As a prodigy since the age of 10, my ethereal landscape paintings captivated audiences and earned me the title of a young genius in traditional Chinese painting. Everyone believed I had an extraordinary talent in this art form and would eventually become a leading figure in the field. I did, but after our marriage, my own artistic style changed dramatically. My works no longer held the same allure they once did. My mentor tried tirelessly to guide me, but it didn't help much. Eventually, I gave up painting altogether, even rejecting the idea of picking up a brush again. Ethan stepped into my art studio, froze when his eyes landed on a landscape painting on the easel. With just a few strokes, the scene had come to life, vivid and mesmerizing. Seeing the light on in the studio, Mrs. Chen entered, startled to find Ethan there. "Sir," she said hesitantly, "this painting, it's something Madame worked on." Ethan looked up. "When did she paint this?" "It was the day you brought Miss La home," Mrs. Chen replied. Ethan nodded slightly, tried to smile, but no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't quite manage it. Leaving the studio, he returned to the bedroom he shared with me. He had told himself countless times that this was just a temporary divorce. Once the storm settled, he would propose to me again, give me the grand wedding I deserved, and make everything right. But somehow, his heart always felt empty. The words I'd said earlier that day, he brushed them off as things I'd uttered, in anger. In his mind, there was no way he wouldn't return to the home they had built together. A knock on the master bedroom door broke the silence. Sitting on the edge of the bed, Ethan looked up to see Law standing there. She was wearing a thin dress, her cheeks faintly flushed, gazing at him quietly. "Why are you here?" he asked. La bit her lip before softly replying, "I was scared being alone at the hotel, so I came to find you. Am I bothering you?" Ethan frowned slightly, but still said, "It's fine. It's late. I'll ask Mrs. Chen to prepare a guest." Room for you? Stay here tonight. He reached for his phone to call Mrs. Chen. Ella stepped into the room. Her delicate eyes, filled with watery tenderness, looked up at him. Ethan, she said softly, I don't want to stay in the guest room. Is that okay? His frown deepened. His lips parted as if to refuse. But when he saw her gentle eyes, he hesitated. Eventually, his resolve faltered. By the time the plane landed in Harbor City, Mason was there to pick me up. Years ago, when he was 18, Mason had saved a girl, but was falsely accused of assault. He was sentenced to 3 years in prison and given a criminal record. No company was willing to hire him. I first met Mason at an art exhibition. He never spoke to anyone, always keeping his head lowered. Whenever someone approached, he would timidly shrank back. One night, as I was on my way home, I nearly fell victim to an attack by a group of thugs. Mason happened to pass by. I thought he'd turn a blind eye, but he didn't. Without hesitation, he stepped in to save me. Later, I asked him, what if I had turned on you, just like the others? He gave me a bitter smile and said then, so be it. Using my family's influence, I cleared his name and brought the truth to light. The day his innocence was proven, he stood at a distance, looking at me through teary eyes, bowing deeply in gratitude. 3 years in prison hadn't erased his kindness. After my father saved Mason and extended a helping hand, he arranged for Mason to join our company, starting from the bottom. Now, Mason is my father's most reliable assistant. It had been a long time. Mason said my name softly, dressed in a trench coat as he casually took my suitcase. I nodded, my nose stinging with an unexplainable sadness. 5 years ago, when I married Ethan and followed him north, Mason had been sent by my father to Country A for intensive training. In my previous life, I never saw Mason again before my death. Mississippi, are you planning to leave again after this visit? Mason asked. I shook my head. No, I'm staying. He gave a faint smile. Mr. Chu was very happy to hear you've come back, Mississippi added. Hearing that name, my hand clenched in my pocket, bitterness washing over me back then. When news of my divorce from Ethan spread everywhere, my father was worried I would suffer. He flew overnight from Harbor City to the capital, trying to persuade me earnestly. Ethan always acted indecisively and unclearly. Back then, was willing to work with that old man from Lila's family, but refused your help, if he didn't want to rely on you, fine. But wasn't he still depending on them in secret? Autumn, just let the divorce happen, he urged. Ethan isn't right for you, he said. He wanted to take me back to Harbor City, but I refused. I cried, fought, begged, to stay through tears. I told him I loved Ethan. I didn't want a divorce. Why should I sacrifice myself to fulfill his sense of gratitude? Even if it kills me, I wouldn't leave him in the end. I didn't go. My father was so enraged he suffered a heart attack, was rushed to the hospital. We received multiple critical alerts overnight, and my mother's hair turned white in a single day. When my father finally woke up, he didn't say a word to me. But I knew he was deeply disappointed. Even on her deathbed, my mother tried to reason with me. Your father has never interfered in your decisions, but Ethan isn't a good match for you, she urged, but I wouldn't listen. I stubbornly pursued what I wanted, crashing into walls over and over until it cost me my life. Only then did I realize I wasn't as important to Ethan as I had thought. Are they doing well? I asked Mason. He nodded. The company is thriving, and Mr. and Mrs. Chu are in good health. I smiled faintly, meeting his calm gaze. Thank you, Mason. Thank you for taking care of my parents in my place. He shook his head. It was my duty. If it hadn't been for you and Mr. Chu helping me back then, I would have died in some dark corner a long time ago. The trending topics on social media kept spiraling. What started as accusations that La was Ethan's mistress had now turned into claims that I was heartless and unfaithful. Yesterday, paparazzi had taken photos of Mason and me at the airport, fueling rumors that I'd been cheating on Ethan, claiming that was the true reason behind our breakup. I couldn't help but laugh bitterly, lowering my gaze to my phone. I saw a message from La's private account. She had sent me a photo of herself at the villa last night, along with a message. Ethan invited me to stay overnight. What do you think he'll do tonight? Ethan is a responsible man, but now that the shackles are gone, he's trying to provoke me. But my heart was already numb to such things. Mason handed me a cup of tea, glancing worriedly at my phone before saying calmly, Mississippi, I'll make sure you get justice for all the wrongs you've endured. I didn't respond. Instead, I asked, I heard my father introduced you to several socialites and encouraged you to start a family. Why did you refuse? Mason froze, caught off guard by my question. His hands trembled slightly. He adjusted his teacup and stayed, silent for a long moment. Then I pressed on, Is it because of me? His gaze flickered nervously as he briefly looked at me before quickly looking away again. Over the past 5 years, even though we hadn't seen each other, Mason never failed to send me extravagant birthday gifts. He would transfer large sums of money to my account from time to time, practically giving me everything he earned. I refused his gestures dozens of times, but he was persistent. One day, I finally called him and for the first time, lost my temper. I told him, You saved my life once, and I helped you once. That makes us even. My father brought you into the company, and everything you've achieved is because of your own efforts. You don't owe me anything. I'm not your creditor. What you're doing now only damages my marriage and makes Ethan misunderstand our relationship. After that, Mason stopped transferring money to me. His gifts became more measured, less extravagant. I told him again, Mason, I've told you. Before you don't owe me anything. He hesitated, biting his lip, then replied softly, That's not why. His lips curled into a faint smile, and his eyes shone with sincerity. I love you, Miss Autumn. I know there's a huge difference between us, like mud and clouds. I've never dared to hope you'd look back at me, but my heart belongs to you. I don't want to fool myself, nor do I want to hold anyone else back. As Mason's words trailed off, I quietly looked up at him. We're the same age, but he matured much earlier than I did. When I first met him, he was shy and out of place. Now, he's a pillar of the company and my father's most trusted confidant. Last night, after we returned to the old house, my father spoke with me for a long time. He talked about the company's future and my future. Then he asked me 2 questions. The first was, Do you still love Ethan? I shook my head immediately. No, I answered. But when he asked the second question, I fell silent. Would you consider marrying Mason? My father had been planning his retirement, although Mason had been by his side for years. He wasn't part of our family. At first I was unsure, but now I knew the answer. Mason, will you marry me? 2 days later in the capital, Ethan sat in his art studio. His head was bowed as he replayed the clip of my interview with the intern. The intern had asked, Do you still love Mr. Ethan? I had smiled and answered, No. Just 3 simple words, yet they left him feeling inexplicably suffocated. He had replayed that moment countless times, trying to read something from my expression, but found nothing. He felt frustrated. He closed our chat window, but then saw that our last exchange was from the day I reminded him to meet me at 9 a.m. at the Civil Affairs Bureau to finalize our divorce. He had simply replied, Okay, and that was it. In the past, I loved clinging to him, sharing every little detail of my life. He'd always respond promptly. But as he scrolled through our chat history, he realized it had become mostly one-sided. I had been talking to myself, and his responses were just okay or got it. He'd been too busy with work at the company. After La's father passed away, her depression worsened, and she attempted suicide multiple times. He'd been consumed with trying to manage everything and hadn't been able to focus on me. Suddenly, Jason sent him a message. Autumn is marrying Mason. Ethan shot to his feet in shock, accidentally knocking over a nearby easel. The landscape painting on it fluttered to the floor. He bent down to pick it up. A medical report slipped out from underneath the painting. He froze for 2 seconds when he finished reading the report. His fingertips trembled slightly. The patient exhibits severe emotional instability with recurring suicidal thoughts. Severe sleep disturbances are noted. The patient shows signs of moderate depression. The date at the bottom of the diagnosis was the very day Ethan proposed divorce. "Ethan, what's going on?" La, hearing the commotion, rushed into the studio from the master bedroom. When she saw the diagnosis report in Ethan's hands, calculating glint flashed in her eyes. "May I take a look at that?" she asked softly. Ethan said nothing. His chest tightened painfully. Ella took the report from him without resistance. Flipping through a few pages, relief flashed across her face. She patted his shoulder lightly and said, "Don't worry, Ethan. Remember, I'm also a depression patient. You've seen how bad it can get during my episodes. But that day saw Autumn, and she looked perfectly healthy. Nothing like someone suffering from an illness, maybe. She was just upset and fabricated this report to get your attention." Law was about to continue, but Ethan, suppressing his emotions, took the report back. He took a few steps away, his mind racing, and suddenly turned to her, "Starting tomorrow, don't stay in the master bedroom anymore," he said flatly. "If Autumn finds out, it'll cause unnecessary trouble." Law froze, stunned by the time she snapped out of it and tried to follow him. Calling Ethan, he was already downstairs, hurrying out without even grabbing his coat. In that moment, Ethan didn't care whether the report was real or whether I was truly marrying Mason. The only thing on his mind was finding me and bringing me back home. Meanwhile, Mason had been carefully involved in every detail of our wedding preparations. During the day, he managed company affairs. That night, Mason supervised the wedding arrangements, carefully writing out the invitations by hand. "Autumn, you don't need to handle all this yourself," he said gently. "Let your assistant take care of it. You're already working so hard, you shouldn't exhaust yourself further." I stood at the top of the stairs, holding a cup of tea, watching him in the living room. He sat down his pen and gave me a warm smile. "No matter what it is, I want to give you the best," Mason said softly. "I know I might not hold a place in your heart, but you've always been at the center of mine." For a moment, as our eyes met, I felt a flicker of emotion stirring inside me, something I hadn't felt in a long time. "Mason, you don't need to feel burdened by this," I whispered. "Just focus on being a beautiful bride." He chuckled softly, his eyes calm but no longer hiding the depth of his feelings. "I will," I nodded faintly. He looked at me one last time, then turned and walked toward the car. It was just Ethan and me by the roadside. He instinctively tried to come closer, but I gently stepped back, keeping my tone soft. "Mr. Ethan, let's keep some distance," I said. "Otherwise, if the paparazzi see us, social media will be full of stories about me clinging to my ex again. No matter the time or place, I couldn't afford another scandal. People are always especially harsh on women, and the situation with Law proved that, from the beginning to the end. Ethan was the one who failed to handle things properly, yet in the end, I was the one accused of being petty and lacking grace. Ethan's eyes dimmed as a bitter smile tugged at his lips. Though it didn't reach his eyes, "I've asked my assistant to handle the situation on the platform," he said softly. "I'm sorry you had to endure all this. I didn't realize how much trouble it caused you." I looked at him and replied calmly, "Ethan, if you didn't know how much public opinion could hurt someone, you wouldn't have chosen to divorce me just to protect Law. In my previous life, I was falsely accused of cheating with multiple male models. I was publicly shamed, and Ethan divorced me. My career collapsed. I became everyone's joke. Some even mocked me to my face, saying, 'Autumn, after everything your ex-husband put you through, how do you even have the nerve to keep living?' If I were you, I'd have jumped off an 18-story building by now." I couldn't sleep at night. I'd sit by the floor-to-ceiling windows, staring at the city lights. I burned down my studio and destroyed everything Ethan had given me, as if that could erase him from my heart. I vented all my frustration, hating how the boy who once loved me with all his heart had pushed me to the brink. Eventually, slit my wrists. To this day, I still remember the feeling of my life slipping away. Drop by drop. Ethan opened his mouth to explain, but no words came out. Finally, he could only bow his head weakly. "Autumn, I'll make it up to you," he said softly. I couldn't hold back a laugh. I'd heard that too many times after Law's father passed away. Ethan left our engagement dinner halfway through, saying Law had a problem. I needed to check on her on our wedding day. Law had attempted suicide after I dropped her off at our bridal suite. Ethan stayed with her all night. I hesitated, questioning whether I should go through with this relationship. But seeing how exhausted he looked, I swallowed my doubts. I loved Ethan, so I was willing to endure all the hardships with him. Every broken promise was met with the same response. "Autumn, I'll make it up to you." Ethan always believed we had a lifetime together, but he forgot that love can wear thin over time. In my past life, I couldn't tell if I still loved him or if it was just obsession. I scoffed and said, "Ethan, I've asked for so little, but even that seems too much for you. I'm my parents' beloved daughter too. Why should I let you trample all over me?" "Just end this," I finished, turning to leave. Ethan panicked, grabbing my arm. His unsteady body nearly stumbled, and his pale lips trembled as he spoke. "I won't agree to this. I can't just let it go, Autumn. You're my wife. You can't leave me." His voice quivered. I pulled my arm free and laughed softly. "Ethan, we're already divorced. You forced me to sign the papers, pressured me into the press conference to clarify everything, and even made sure I went to the civil affairs bureau to finalize it. You can't deny that, can you?" He froze as I started to walk away again. I tilted my head slightly toward him. "Ethan, you and Ellie actually make a great pair." His face turned ashen instantly. He had arrived in Harbor City late at night after his assistant tracked down my itinerary. He hadn't rested for a moment before rushing to find me, but when he saw me in a wedding dress, laughing with Mason, he stopped in his tracks. He stood under a camper tree, silent, watching. He couldn't remember the last time he'd seen me smile so genuinely whenever we were together. It always ended in arguments about Law. Gradually, he stopped coming home, either staying late at the office or drinking with friends all night. That moment, he realized with absolute clarity what I had said at the civil affairs bureau that day was heartfelt. I didn't want him anymore, and he couldn't live without me. He stood outside the bridal boutique, watching quietly, not knowing how long. He'd been there. Even Ethan didn't know. All he felt was the sharp pain of realizing he might have lost me forever. He even considered barging in and punching Mason, warning him to stay away from his wife, but in the end, he couldn't do it. He was afraid of how Law might see him. "Autumn left a while ago," Law murmured, tugging Ethan's sleeve and pulling him out of his thoughts. He lowered his eyes to look at her, his voice cold and hoarse. "Why are you here?" he asked. "I heard Autumn is marrying someone else. I was worried you'd be upset. So I came to check on you," she said softly, reaching out to hug him. Ethan frowned, pressing his hand firmly on her shoulder to stop her. His eyes glistened. "Law's voice trembled as she said, "Ethan, Autumn doesn't want you anymore, but I do. Let him get married, okay?" Ethan had never refused her anything before. She always assumed that once Autumn divorced him, she'd automatically become Mrs. Ethan. Now, Ethan's expression turned icy. "Law, do you even know what you're saying?" "I do, Ethan. I love you," she confessed for the first time. Ethan let out a pale, bitter smile, but the more he smiled, the closer he came to tears. Jason had warned him countless times. "Law's feelings for you aren't right. Ethan, if you can't keep her in check, she'll ruin your marriage. Should send her away before it's too late." But Ethan never believed him. Now he saw how blind he had been. Harbor City was far from the capital. But once something hit social media, it spiraled quickly. On the third day of Ethan's attempts to reconcile with me, Mason sent him proof that LLA had falsified my medical report. He also gathered evidence showing how Ethan had repeatedly prioritized Law over me, even risking his career. All of this was released online, creating a damning narrative. Overnight, Public opinion was sharply divided, but I didn't care. Anymore? Some accused Law of betraying kindness, ruining my marriage, and causing its collapse. Others criticized Ethan for his hypocrisy, questioning why he couldn't repay Law's father's kindness with money or resources instead of tormenting his wife to despair and divorce. Ethan's reputation plummeted, and his company's stock faltered. Soon, I uncovered more evidence that Law had staged photos of herself and Ethan in a hotel, even hiring online trolls to insult herself as his mistress to evoke sympathy. Mason released that evidence too. Turning social media into chaos, Ethan reached his breaking point. He planned to send Law abroad, but after seeing the trending topics, he nearly strangled her on the side of the road. "Why did you do it?" he demanded furiously. La first tried to play the emotional card, but as his grip tightened and she could barely breathe, she suddenly burst into hysterical laughter, admitting, "Yes, I wanted to be Mrs. Ethan. I wanted Autumn out of the picture. Ethan, if you truly loved her, I wouldn't have had a chance to interfere." She added. That moment, Ethan, consumed by rage, vomited blood and collapsed. A bystander captured the scene on video, and it quickly went viral. Ethan's company stock plummeted further, and he was removed as CEO. Law's reputation was utterly destroyed, leaving her no choice but to leave the country. But fate was cruel in her way to the airport. She was involved in a fatal car accident. On my wedding day, Mason hosted a grand celebration. Flowers filled the city, and fireworks lit up the night sky. It became everyone's talk. One guest jokingly remarked that Mary and Mason must have been karma from a past life. Mason let out a cold laugh and immediately had the guest escorted out. During his vows, spoke openly, "I am nothing more than the Chu family's son-in-law in this life. I belong to the Chu family. In life and in death, I'll be a ghost of the Chu family." Though my heart might not have entirely belonged to Mason, his unwavering devotion never wavered. On our wedding night, he held me tightly, as if afraid I might leave or vanish. When I pressed him for answers, I learned Ethan had taken his own life. Before he died, Ethan regained a moment of clarity. He sent Mason the medical report I had left in the studio, along with a letter addressed to me. The letter was long, every word soaked in guilt. He described a nightmare how in his dream he forced me to divorce him. When I refused to compromise, he schemed against me, setting me up to be with several men. He wrote that I was so desperate I slit my wrists and took my own life. He claimed that in his dream, he didn't mean to drive me to despair. He only wanted me to bow and give in. He never imagined it would lead to my death. Most painfully, he confessed he didn't know my illness was real. He swore that if he had known, he would never have treated me that way. He described how in the dream, when he saw blood covering the bathroom floor, his heart shattered. He wished he could have been the one to die instead. The letter ended with 2 sentences. "Thankfully, the events in the dream didn't happen. I'm sorry." I let out a cold laugh as I read it. In the end, I casually tossed the letter into the trash, along with the medical report. Mason frowned slightly. "Mississippi," he murmured. I responded softly. The old Autumn was sick, but I'm not that person anymore. Leaving him cured me.
After a long pause, Mason's frown softened into a resigned but loving smile. I looked at him and returned his smile thankfully. In this life, I lost nothing.